Okay, right now I'm going to walk you through how to correctly answer the telephone number for your response problem. The first thing you should always do is actually read the directions. So hopefully everyone figured out that a phone number is made up by an area code, a local prefix, and a line number. And here's an example of a telephone number broken up into its three parts. Now, you should also read the classes that they give you. For example, here is a telephone number that has three fields: area, prefix, and line, that represent the three parts of a phone number. What you have next is a constructor, which we're going to finish in part C. And what it does is it takes in a full 10-digit phone number. And the job of a constructor is always to assign the fields. So our job is going to be to break up the full 10-digit number 847, 647, 7744, for example, into its three parts, and then put them individually into each of the fields. In part A, the first part we're going to do is this method called getAreaCode. And what it's supposed to do is take in a full 10-digit number like this and return only the area code part, which is the first three digits. Likewise, in part B, same idea but a little bit more difficult. We take in the full 10-digit number and it returns the middle number, which is the prefix. The third method is the line number. And this one we don't have to do. You can just assume it's already done. It says the implementation is not shown. So just remember that we have this method. And last but not least, we have another method here called placeCall. And what it does is it takes a parameter of how many minutes you have left to place a phone call, and it returns an int, which is how long you actually spent on the phone. So for example, if you have 50 minutes of time left to call someone, you talk for 20 minutes. So if you put 50 in here, and you actually talk for 20 minutes, this would return 20. So those are the methods, and some of them we're going to have to finish in parts A, B, and C. So in part A, In part A, we have to finish the getAreaCode method, which takes the full 10-digit telephone number and only gets the first three digits. The easiest way to do that is just to do division by 10 million. Because if you divide by 10 million, what that'll do is it's going to truncate off all of these digits. And essentially what you would normally do mathematically is if you divide it by 10 million, that'd be putting a decimal point here. But in reality, because we're dividing by 10 million with integers, or longs in this case, which are essentially integers, we will only get the quotient, or the first three digits. So the answer to this one is simply return full divided by 10 million. Technically in code you can't put commas, but if it helps you, you can put commas. So essentially for each of these zeros, all 7 of them, it's going to take off one of these digits. So that's a nice trick to know. You could assign a variable and return that as well. That would be another solution. One thing you do not want to do, and I saw some of you do this, so this is bad, you should not be assigning the variable area to be full divided by 10 million. And the reason why is that's not what the directions tell you to do. It says nothing about assigning variables. It says nothing about assigning fields. All it does is return the result of what's the area code out of the parameter. So make sure you read the directions. Additionally, if this was supposed to change a parameter or change a field, usually there'll be a post condition which says what will be changed. So no field should be changed according to the directions. Part 2 is pretty much the same idea, except for we want to get the middle digits here. And there's several ways to do this. Here's the way I'm going to think about it. If we took this number and divide it by 1,000 or 10,000, what that'll do, oops, there we go, divide by 10,000, what that'll do is it's actually going to knock off the first 4 digits. So that would give us 847, 647. And then all I want is the get rid of the first 3 digits. So you can accomplish that by doing percent 1,000 because that'll get the remainder if you divide by 1,000, and that is just these 3 digits. So the short answer is return. And it'll be our full number divided by 10,000. And then we percent it with 1,000. All right, on to part C. In part C, a lot of people had trouble. We're trying to finish the telephone constructor. Remember that the purpose of a constructor is to assign the fields. And if you forgot, the field names were area, line, or actually prefix comes after area, and line. And our job is going to be to assign them to something. And it's going to be based on this variable full. Now there's 2 ways to do this. The bad way is to rewrite all the code we've done before. The good way is to recognize that we have a get area code method already written in our class. So I'm just going to call it. And I'm going to put parentheses because it's a method and a semicolon. Now, how can I call this method? Well, because this method is in the class telephone number, I'll go up to the class declaration. I have this method get area code and the constructor's in the class, I can just go ahead and call it. Now you'll notice it takes a parameter, so I'm going to have to pass something in, and it's supposed to be the full number. So when I finish this constructor, for the first line, I need to put in the parameter full. And the rest of these will be the same. There is a get prefix number, and you'll see in the directions above that's even mentioned that you can use those. And you'll notice that it doesn't list anything about getting the line number. And that's okay, because if you go back to the original class, we had one already written for us that we could use. So you can see it right here, get line number. So I'm going to use that one. So this brings up a couple of important things to remember. When you are doing a free response problem, never forget any methods that you are given at the beginning or ones that you finished earlier, because usually in a later part of the problem, you're going to have to use them. So here I am using them. Also remember that a constructor always assigns the fields. That's the job of a constructor. Don't forget that. So at worst, write the field names here in equals, and then see if you can figure out what you need to assign them to. You would have lost points if you had redone all the calculations for what the area code should be based on this field, like full divided by 10 million again, because they want you to demonstrate that you know how to call a method. All right, last but not least, the trickiest part for most of you was this calling card class where you had to finish the annoy Steve method. And so the idea is that you have 2 fields already. You have a telephone number called number to call, which I'm assuming is Steve's number, and minutes left is how many more minutes you have left to call on your calling card. Now the first confusion for most of you was, what number are we calling and for how many minutes? And the answer is you don't need to worry about that because there is a constructor here where the implementation is not shown. So it's missing its brace here. So the implementation is not shown, meaning it's done somewhere, and it's going to initialize the telephone number to be this phone number. It'll initialize minutes left to be this number of minutes. But you don't have to worry about that. Your job is just to finish the annoy Steve method. So most of you figured out that you want to do something like this. While your minutes left is greater than 0. Now, where you mostly ran into trouble was, all right, so what should I do when minutes left is greater than 0? And most of you figured out on the first page of the free response, there is this place call method. So that looks great. I should use that, and I can put in how many minutes are left to call. So what a lot of you did is you just wrote place call here. The problem is the place call method is in another class. Specifically, it's in the telephone number class. So you need to do something with the other class. To call a method from another class, a lot of you said, well, let's do telephone number dot. But that would assume it's a static method, and it needs to be for a specific phone number. So the correct way to call the telephone number is to do number to call dot place call. So you're using your field and you're putting in how many minutes you have left. So that's the first thing. If you want to call a method in another class that's not static, you have to call it off of an instance of the class, which we have right here. Now, one important thing to remember is that this method returns something. So let me go back to the first page again. What it returns is the length of the successful phone call in minutes. So I'll make a variable here called int used and assign that to the result of calling this method. So after I make one phone call, this will represent how many minutes I've used. And so if you notice, I've got a loop here with my minutes left variable that runs while it's greater than 0. So what I need to do is decrement that variable by how many minutes I've just used. So that means minutes left minus equals used. And my computer's freaking out. Let's try that again. Minus equals used. And there you go. That's pretty much it. That'll finish the annoy Steve method. We'll keep calling him until we run out of minutes. So big things to remember again is to call a method from another class, and it's not a static method. You have to call it off of an instance. And then make sure that you're assigning variables based on the return type of a method and then using that return in some way. And that's it.